always had my demons. And so I went away.
Hello, Dexter Morgan fans, and welcome to the Dexter New Blood WrapUp podcast. I'm your host, Scott Reynolds, a writer-producer of the SHOWTIME Original Series Dexter, and now the new SHOWTIME special event series, Dexter New Blood. That's right. Dexter is plunging back into our lives on November 7th. But before we dive into the new series, we're going to be discussing what was and what you may not have known, and maybe even reveal a bit about what's to come. Today, we're celebrating Dexter by delving into favorite moments, characters, and even some burning questions with a couple of amazing Dexter superfans. First up, Gareth Watkins.
Hi, it's great to meet you.
He's the host of the Dexter fan podcast, Dissecting Dexter. And Samantha Hanratty.
Hi.
Who is starring in the new SHOWTIME Original Series Yellowjackets. And we are all super pumped to see this. Oh my God.
I'm pumped to be here.
So let's jump right in. What sort of drew you guys to the character of Dexter? Because, you know, it's kind of a dark subject matter, kind of a dark dude. I mean, I know I get all sorts of looks whenever I reveal that I write for Dexter. What drew you to Dexter initially? Gareth, why don't you go?
Well, it was a friend of my wife that put us onto the show, and he said you really need to be watching this Dexter, and he described it, and I thought that sounds like something unlike anything I've seen before. It was totally different. Clearly something I should be taking a stab at, if you pardon the expression, pardon the pun. So we did. We dove into it, and it quickly became a favourite show. And I think it's the anti-hero that attracted me, this concept of our protagonist who does bad stuff and isn't your classic chiseled goody two-shoes hero that might have featured in TV series back in the 80s and 90s that I'm sure a lot of us grew up with. And it was just a change of tone. I like the dark tone. I think I was just ready for it. I think it was at a stage of my TV viewing journey, if you like. And of course, it came along at a time with other shows that were also, it was kind of a period of new shows with anti-heroes like Breaking Bad and Mad Men, Sopranos, and audiences embraced this kind of thing. And I got hooked. I loved the colourful setting. I loved the mix of darkness with very dark humour. Dexter's voiceovers were fun. And I immediately loved Deb, a very colourful character, colourful in personality as well as language. And yeah, I just went in, jumped straight in and loved it.
Oh, that's great. As Deb would say, fucking A. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that, my mom had told me about the show and was like, I think you'd really love it because I've always loved crime shows.
Quick pause. Just your mom suggested. Mom's awesome.
Yeah. She was like, you have to watch the show. And I'd heard about it. And so I started watching probably about 5 years ago is when I started watching it for the first time. And I think I spent 2 months just binge watching the entire show. I don't think I saw a single person in those 2 months. I was, I had a little like dance every time that the theme, I'd say theme song, but the opening sequence would come on. And yeah, it was just one of those shows. It's one of those shows that you sit on the edge of your seat and you're putting when I watch something, I put myself in the shoes of the character, as an actor. And I'm like, dang, what would I do if I was, if I was in that situation or, if I was Dexter and just getting to watch, he's so smart and he's charming and he's exciting. And the entire show is exciting and you fall in love with every character. And yeah, I grew up watching very black and white, good guy versus bad guy. And to see a show that just completely scraps all of that. And yeah, you're rooting for the vigilante in it. It's just so exciting. And it's exciting enough to then watch a 2-minute trailer for what's to come. And I'm still to this day sitting on the edge of my seat being like, oh my God. My boyfriend sent me the trailer the second it dropped. And I was like, I'm shaking. I'm so excited. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. So Gareth, you saw it like week to week and had to wait in between? Or did you binge it also? Because I've heard the way people experience it has been so different nowadays. I have a 17-year-old daughter, so she binged it like you did, Sam, where it's like, 8 hours a day, just pounding this thing in her brain. But back in the day, you had to just wait a week, which is how it's going to air this time also.
Yeah, so for me, I think it was season 2 had finished when I jumped on board. So
okay.
I'd missed the week to week of the first 2 seasons, and then we binged it, and we binged the hell out of it. And then we had to wait for season 3.
Do you like waiting or do you like binging?
Do you know, when it's a show, that's a tough one, because sometimes shows just drop all at once these days, don't they? And you can just go, watch a couple of episodes a night. But there is a lot to be said for watching an episode a week, and then you get to savor it, and then you get to think about it and let it ruminate, and you can talk about it with your friends. You could podcast about it. There's an idea. And chat to people about it and get involved in the conversation. Whereas when something like Stranger Things these days, it just drops all at once. Great show. And that would be ripe for podcasting and theorizing about, but it drops at once and everyone watches it at different speeds. And you don't get that same community building around it.
Yeah, because you go like, hey, did you see when Doak said, I didn't get that far yet.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of that. It's not as shared.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to getting now a chance to watch it week to week, because I know, like, with my partner, we're going to be making it a date night, a Dexter date night, where it's like we watch the show and we get to sit and talk about it for the rest of the week together, and I like the idea of viewing parties with friends and family, it's different than sitting down and watching it. I feel like binging is almost a solo thing, whereas getting to watch it week to week is more of a community aspect, The
communal experience of Dexter is surprising how that works, which I guess sort of gets to the podcasting. So Gareth, you were podcasting this thing before I started the Dexter WrapUp in season 7, but you were going strong from when? And how did that come about?
So the podcast started in 2010.
What's the name of the podcast?
Dissecting Dexter. And when that happened to Rita, I thought, right, I'm going to do Dexter, because there's going to be lots of excitement for the new season. There should be a ready-made audience. There'll be people clamoring for Dexter content. I had a look out there and there wasn't much out there podcast-wise. There were 1 or 2 podcasts, but obviously it was between seasons. So I thought I will go back to the start, season 1, and we'll do a rewatch podcast. So I went episode to episode, and I got to about just into season 2, I think, when season 5 aired. So I went week to week then, and then returned to the rewatch in between seasons. So it's been sort of jumping about a bit in the Dexter timeline, but it's been a lot of fun.
I love it.
I kind of want to hear from your words what it was like at the first table read, and then all the way to the last table read, not from the newest season, but I just want to hear, what that felt like and what it was like to see it all come together, and then to kind of close that book for a little bit.
First season, every episode was like a joy. I was a writer assistant on the first season. So I've sort of gone from writing assistant to executive producer. So that's been fun. Amazing. So, obviously I'm such a fan. I'm such a geeky fan, which I guess is why I love doing the podcast and love just doing all this sort of stuff. It was a joy watching Michael and Jennifer and everybody just sort of figure all this out, and then see the difference between what they did at the table read and what they did on set, Right. Imagine for you, right? When you do the table reads, it's sort of like you read it, you absorb it, and then something happens in between the table read and when you perform it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like that's where the magic sort of happens. Let's just talk about some of our favorite moments. Samantha.
Yes.
Do you have like a top 3?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have a number 1, believe it or not.
Okay. I believe it.
And I feel like everybody has their different opinions on it. But I think for me is when Deb confesses her love to Dexter. It's like just, oh my gosh, like it's such a good scene and such a good moment that I actually pulled it and did it in an acting class because I loved it so much. Like that's how obsessed I was over it. And I just, it just added this whole new thickness to the plot, and it's their brother and sister. It's very, it's just the whole thing is just no, but it's so good. It's a yes. You know what I mean? So that's definitely my favorite moment, I think, of the entire series is just in that confession from her.
It was funny about that. Like when we were coming up with that in the room, there was half the room was like, that's just too wrong. We just can't, and I have to remember, they're adopted and this sort of thing happens in a lot of families with adoptions and all that. But what was funny was like in a show where a man captures people, drugs them, strips them, wraps them in plastic, gets a confession out of them, stabs them in the heart or chops off their head and then chops them into pieces. like, that's the line we draw?
Right.
Like
That's
connection?
Well, that's actually, I actually had a question for you. So that wasn't thought of in the very beginning. That wasn't like a thing that you guys told Jennifer in the very beginning, like, hey, Deb's in love with Dexter. Like there was never that. Was that something that you guys knew, or?
No, it sort of, it appeared as we watched it and as we watched their relationship grow and grow.
Right.
With her, the way that she never was able to really connect with Harry because Harry was connecting so deeply with Dexter. Like things just get all mixed up, Right. So it was one of these things that I think it started sort of forming in our heads around season 6. And of course, Jennifer was just like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
I love that because somehow it worked so well that like, even when I would go back and watch previous seasons, I'd be like, she's totally in love with him, So that's so awesome that even though it wasn't in mind, it works so well.
That scene is one of my favorites from the series as well, primarily because of Jennifer's performance. She just acts the hell out of that. When she confessed, as a fan, I was torn. I was thinking, do I like this direction? Because she had those therapy sessions, didn't she? And the shrink brought up this notion and she's like, hell no, go to hell kind of thing. And then she sort of thought about it. But because I was thinking, yeah, like you say about protecting the ones you love. And I was thinking, would her sisterly love for her brother be enough for her to do what she did later with LaGuerta and not turning him in and all that kind of stuff? And I don't know, but then as a character, I sort of look at her and like you say, she's damaged like Dexter is, just in different ways. She's got daddy issues. She's had trauma. Yeah, she didn't watch her mother get dismembered in front of her, but she lost her mum to cancer. She lost her dad at an early age. She had to compete for her father's affections. Then within the show, Brian, she's been shot. She saw Lundy killed in front of her. She got poisoned. The list goes on. She's been through more trauma than Dexter.
She's been through it.
Yeah, she's been through hell.
When you put it that way.
It's no wonder she's so emotionally dysregulated throughout. She's always short-tempered, hot-headed, impulsive. Maybe her fruity language is linked to that she has no filter. And maybe that's all part of her early experiences.
Wait, didn't they say like that Jennifer like has the most F-bombs to ever be on television or something like that? I swear I heard an interview once upon a time. So awesome.
I mean, there was that scene in the elevator where I think she said the F word like 32 times.
That's fucking great.
Yeah, she had a blast. It was fun. It was fun coming up with new words to use all the time.
And I was going to say Arthur Mitchell, like that's in its own, that his storyline, everything about him was also my favorite of the entire series. Just so good. And it sucks because Rita was my favorite character, but then Arthur is my second favorite character. So it's, I guess if there was any way that she could go, I surprisingly was actually okay with it because I did love him so much. But I'm like, were the actors told prior that like, hey, your death is coming soon? Or like, here's your, or was it not until they got the episodes that they knew like, oh, this is it?
Yeah, we tried to keep it. I tried to know at least a couple weeks ahead,
Right, okay. Because I know some shows, they'll wait till like the day of and they're like, by the way, get ready. Like I've had that. So I was just curious, if it's something that, because I know that so many scripts can be so secretive and especially a show that's so loved like this, that, you want to keep things under wraps. So yeah, I just was curious on if people were prepared.
At the top of every season, every actor's like walks in to the first read through, very wary, looking at everybody else, going, all right, it is a show about serial killing. I mean, who's going to die? Totally. Who's going to die this season? Twitchy.
Yeah, totally.
Because you always knew the big bad was probably going to die. Yeah, like Rita, that was a big secret.
Oh my gosh! But like, wow, what like. I just don't know if I still haven't gotten over it. I have not gotten over that.
That was tragic because she was the person who deserved it least. If anyone deserves a happy future after what she'd been through. It was funny because I followed Julie Benz on Twitter prior to season 4, so it was during shooting. And she posted a picture of the gift that she was given. She was given a knife Do you remember that, Scott? She was given a knife in a box.
Yeah.
And she posted this and said, thanks to everybody for this lovely gift. And it didn't click in my head. Why would she be getting this? When the finale happened, oh my God, it was a punch to the gut. It was horrific. And it was one of those moments where I was watching it, my wife sat next to me and we watched it and there wasn't a sound in the room. And then when the credits rolled, we both just sat there silent, just staring at the credits, not really reading. It was just a blur. And the only other time I've felt like my insides have been ripped out and fed to me was the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones. It was that powerful and shocking. It was the shock value, I think, that made me feel like that initially. But and the tragedy.
Well, it felt like Dexter won. You saw Dexter pop up out of the car and take down Trinity, and you're just like, yes. I've been waiting for this guy to win finally. You know, after all of the incredible carnage that Trinity brought into Dexter's life and into his own life, like the Thanksgiving episode, which is another big fan favorite, it seems like, with Trinity. You know, I remember at the read-through of that script, everybody sitting there was just like, had that same feeling. And it was sad, you know, because Julie Benz is amazing. She was such a great part of this thing. Yeah. But when you're telling a story about a serial killer, it's impossible that it doesn't touch his life in these ways also, you know. It
was awful for him because he'd come to a bit of a turning point, hadn't he, where he was embracing fatherhood, being a husband, a stepfather. He had some sweet moments with the kids. And the last thing he would have wanted is for Harrison to suffer anything close to what he did at that age. And bugger me if it wasn't the identical thing. And there's Harrison sat in a pool of blood. It was just heartbreaking. And you just feel like the floor just drops from beneath him. And, you know, if the earth could have swallowed him up right there, just awful. And you think your heart goes out to him. He's had all this journey and made all this progress. And then you think he's going to be back to square one. But
with a baby
for season 5. Yeah. But the excitement for season 5 are all bets off now. Is he going to go way off the reservation and go ballistic? Or is he going to go the other way? Is it going to, who knows? And that was just the most amazing finish to a season.
Yeah, I think that goes almost back to the binge watching versus watching it, you know, episode by episode and season by season. Because even the way that you're describing it, I'm like, you know, as much fun as it is to binge, I almost feel like even the way that you're talking about it, I almost like missed that then I quickly jumped into season 5 because I'm like, what happens? You know what I mean? But like, I didn't really, just even hearing that, I'm like, wow. Yeah. You really got to almost grieve that loss with him, you know? Wow. Yeah. Like I thought it hit me hard, but I can't imagine then having to wait an entire season to see where things pick up.
It's like, 8 months later.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then that kind of leads into the start of season 5 with one of my favorite moments of the series, which was Dexter killing the redneck in the men's room, because he goes off on his boat, doesn't he? And you think, he's coming unhinged. You know, there was no care. It was just completely spontaneous. Bludgeons this guy with, was it an anchor?
Yeah.
Or some implement. And he just breaks down and he's there crouched on the floor on all fours, and Harry's there and he's trying to comfort him. And Dexter lets out the most inhuman cry. I rewatched it in preparation for this because it's a moment that sticks in my mind, and it just resonates in your core because you know what he's going through, and it's like as human as he's ever been. It's just pure grief. It's an outpouring of grief and anger and all sorts.
It's not controlled.
Wonderful acting.
Yeah. Michael C. Hall is incredible. Yeah. And in that scene, especially. And I agree, like when we were crafting that, it is the point why I'm glad you like that it is his most human moment, you know, his most grieving moment. This person that is so shut down and sort of devoid of emotion and looks at humanity and says, why are they happy or why are they sad? You know, like the funeral that he went to, where he had to put sunglasses on to make it look like, you know, like a pro tip to psychos, wear sunglasses so it looks like you're sad. And he really experiences just intense grief, and rage. Yeah, it was
very powerful.
One of the things I just really love about, especially in the first season, is just seeing the flashbacks. I'm a sucker for flashbacks, and I just love being able to see where Dexter came from, and, you know, and just seeing his relationship with his father, and just seeing, you know, Harry I just loved that entire dynamic, in season 1 of just getting to really understand who he was and who he is now,
He was a victim. I think that's why we care about him so much. And maybe he was a victim to his own father,
Yeah.
James Remar, who's incredible as Harry, always, I've been a big fan of his since like The Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
When you inhabit a character, you create the past and your story. And sometimes it works alongside with what's on screen. And sometimes it's completely different.
Right.
Like for instance, with Remar as Harry, in his story of training Dexter, he and Dexter would like break into the city morgue and they would practice dissecting bodies. Which was, even darker than anything we imagined, and in our imagination, Harry was very much, when it was all sort of like, this will make sense because there are bad people in the world who get away with it. But when Harry, in that episode, when Harry, and in a flashback, when Harry looks in and he finds his son chopping up, like the second or third victim, he vomited. He was just sick. It was too much. And for Remar on the day, Remar was sort of like, nah, that wouldn't be too much. We've done that all the time. I was like, well, what's your favorite, your favorite adversaries for Dexter? I mean, I know we already talked about Trinity. Let's just get that out on the table.
He's a given.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
That's sort of like, okay. And then what?
I love Dokes. And I would almost put him a little bit ahead of Trinity because of, I want to say, legal ramifications of Dokes catching up with him, because Dokes wasn't out to kill him. Dokes wanted to bring him in and give his career a bit of a boost, I guess. But Dokes was a good cop. He was honourable and he was right. He was right.
In any other, if this would have been a 90s movie, he would have been the hero of this show. It would have been Dokes, big brash letters. And he's convinced that there's some bad shit going on in the force.
Yeah, that fight on the dock would have ended differently outside the cabin. But I love right from the first episode, I think Dokes walks past and he's giving him the eye, the narrow eyes, the squint. And Dexter says, how come in a building full of cops, it's only Dokes that sees through me?
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, Dokes is the man of 1,000 memes, isn't he? and their interactions were just goals. And for me, obviously, the surprise motherfucker scene is obviously up there. But I love the moment when they're having that tete-a-tete in Dexter's lab, and Dexter says, "I own you," and he tries to provoke him, and it works. I just love that. I love that. It's almost a punch the air moment.
Yeah, it's like, it's funny for somebody, Dexter, being so sort of alien in this world, the way he's able to sort of like know how to get at people, like in that moment, how he knew just the one thing he could do to win, more or less, Yeah.
I mean, sociopaths can be manipulators, can't they?
That's one of the gifts of a psychopath.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can sort of like stand from the outside and figure out human beings around them and how to manipulate them and how to control them,
I feel like I keep going back to season 1, but I have to say the ice truck killer, it's Brian, because that one, I guess I just always keep picking the things that have like a lot of the heart, but like that was tough, because that was another one that kind of messed with my own morality of just, obviously not a big fan of Brian and the path he's picked, but also at the same time, like that longing for the connection between him and Dexter. And it just, somehow I still found myself somewhat empathizing.
Yeah, I mean, there was a part of me even just watching it after, being a part of it, like when Brian left that security guard out and just being like, here you go, you can do it, be like me, connect up. And then especially at the end, how heartbreaking it is he's got to choose between his sister, who will never, as far as that part goes, never really fully understand and accept him, and a brother who will fully embrace him for who he is. Yeah, it was tough. Like even in the moment, we were sort of like, it could go either way. But ultimately, as Dexter says, Deb is, if he's capable of love, he says about himself through his unreliable narrator, if he's capable of love, it would have been for Deb. And that's the heart of the story in a lot of ways. Even continuing into the new season, that she's sort of his conscience, his soul, his antagonist, all those things. And it all stems from that moment you're talking about, that it all stems from Dexter choosing Deb over his own flesh and blood. Gareth, do you have any questions about Dexter that's been sort of like burning in the back of your head?
Well, one for me that quite a broad one, really. I mean, I guess we could talk about it for hours, this topic, but it's the concept, and you did touch on this in one of your responses earlier, is the whole notion of Harry being a bad father, ? Discuss. That he got Dexter when he was 3 after that traumatic event.
And ditched
and
the
ditched
brother.
Brian. So their paths had been together, Dexter and Brian, and then they diverged quite dramatically. So Dexter went into this loving family and Brian went into the system. And Harry, it seems fairly early on, cottoned on to Dexter having some quote-unquote issues, which
Stop killing pets.
Which obviously grew more and more serious. And I think his handling of his son's problems came from a well-meaning place. But ultimately, by the time he pulled in some psychiatric help in the form of Dr. Vogel, that Dexter was already on the cusp of teenage. Was he 10?
I want to say like 12, maybe.
Something like that. Yeah.
It's fuzzy,
those
his preteen,
those sort of antisocial, those problematic traits were pretty much ingrained by that point. In other words, the damage was pretty much done. You know, as a developing human being, don't they say that show me the child at 7 and I'll show you the man at 30? Something like that. I'm maybe misquoting the saying, but it's something like that your core characteristics are pretty much ingrained at that point. So it's like Harry was well-meaning but seriously misguided. And it brings in the concept of nature versus nurture and whether someone is born bad, born evil, or whether they're a product of their environment. And we saw what happened to Brian and we saw what happened to Dexter. They both ended up as killers, but Dexter in a far more structured way, but still having to kill, and Brian much more chaotic. I guess there's a question in there somewhere. Is whether in the writer's room, whether you wrestled or whether you were completely aware all the way through that, you know, Harry really, he's not the best dad in the world, is he? He clearly loves his son, but he's not making good choices here.
Yeah, there were other solutions he could have gone down, it feels like. But the problem is that some of those solutions would have been like incarceration or put away into a psychiatric hospital. For us in the room, it was very much like the fact that Brian ended up, and the first book, Darkly Dreaming Dexter, is about this relationship between Dexter, the sort of like courtship between Dexter and Brian. The fact that Brian turned out so incredibly violent and conscienceless in his need to kill sort of formed our decision. You know, it's more nature that caused Dexter to be what he is. Like there's something in his brain, you know, that's completely off, and that there was sort of no choice, sort of inevitable to a certain extent, outside of, you know, a mental hospital for the rest of his life or something. Mm. But again, that's the fun of doing a TV show, is that the minute you put it out there in the world, it's no longer the writers, it's no longer the actors, it's like everyone's. It's you know, it's the viewers. We all shape. There are shows that I love that I feel like are just as much mine. I'm sure Yellowjackets is going to be that way for me. That are just as much mine as they are the writers and the actors. You know, it's like you give this thing out into the world, and then everybody makes their own sort of choices and decisions. And there's things that they hate. You know, like Sam, when you're talking about when Deb announced her love to Dexter, there were some people that were just like, no, this is awful. How could you do this to us? And that's valid, right? Because that's how they feel. That's the joy of creating these sort of things. Yeah. Harry was a bad dad, though. I'd feel pretty good. And Vogel was a bad doctor to go to. I think it was sort of like that was the trigger, you know, to the gun in a lot of ways for how it happened. But he surely meant well. So talking about Dexter and Yellowjackets a little bit, because I'm super excited about what you're going to be bringing. You're Misty, right, in it, Samantha?
Yes. Misty Cridgley, yes.
Misty Cridgley. So what sort of things do you feel like Dexter and Misty and Yellowjackets and themes and all of that sort of, without giving any spoilers away, because, you know, all we've seen is like a trailer at this point, because there's some darkness going on that show, I think. It looks like.
Oh, totally. Oh, yeah, totally. I think the only thing I can say without giving away too much is just that, you know, if I had to say the similarities between the two would be that both Misty and Dexter have this, you know, underlying darkness, and that they both have a bit of a face they put on, a facade in front of others. And as audience members, we'll be able to see when there aren't people watching, those true colors show. And she's a real joy to play. I'm so excited for the show to come out and for people to see all of the elements that is Misty, because she's got a lot going on.
Oh, it's going to be so great.
Things get really crazy. We're in 1996 in a plane crash with a soccer team. That's another thing. I think the elements of just secrets, both shows have a lot of secrets that get unfolded throughout the show. And
does it flash forward and behind and everything too?
Yeah. So there's me and Christina Ricci both play Misty.
Wow.
And yeah, I know. What an honor. What the heck? I'm like, it's really so special. Yeah, we just have a phenomenal cast. And it's 1996 for the crash, and then all the way up until, I believe, 2021. And it's showing, what happened, the survivors, who did what, and all of their secrets kind of coming to the surface.
I'm in.
Yay! Yay! I'm so excited.
Yeah, it sounds intriguing.
It's going to be good.
Thank you so much for coming on board this. Gareth, I look forward to being on your podcast. Samantha, we can't wait to see you on as Misty on Yellowjackets.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very, very excited. It'll be an exciting night. I'm very, very, very thrilled.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode. Listen every Tuesday and subscribe to the Dexter New Blood Wrap-Up whenever you get your podcasts, and watch Dexter New Blood Sundays starting November 7th, only on Showtime. And then November 14th begins Yellowjackets, and you don't want to miss that at all. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.